Captain Jake Morrison had been flying through space for 12 years, but he had never seen anything like this. The massive structure floated in the darkness ahead of his ship, bigger than any moon he had ever visited. It looked like it was made of crystal and metal, twisted together in patterns that hurt his eyes to look at too long. "Captain, are you seeing this?" Lieutenant Amy Carson called from her station. Her voice was tight with excitement and fear. "The energy readings are impossible. This thing has been here for thousands of years, but it still has power running through it." Jake stared at the view screen. The Aurora was Earth's newest exploration ship, sent out to map the far edges of human space. They were supposed to be looking for new planets to settle, not ancient alien structures. But here it was, sitting next to a dying star, like it had been waiting for them. "Any idea what species built it?" Jake asked. Amy shook her head. "Nothing in our database matches this design. The materials are unknown, too. Whatever built this, they were more advanced than anything we have ever encountered." Jake made his decision. "Prepare a boarding party. Full environmental suits. We are going to take a look inside." Dr. Nathan Brooks adjusted his scanner as they floated through the yaw. Airlock into the alien station. The archaeologist had spent his whole career studying dead civilizations, but nothing had prepared him for this. The walls around them glowed with a soft blue light that seemed to come from within the material itself. "The atmosphere is breathable," reported Sergeant Danny Carter, checking his readings. "Temperature is perfect for humans. It is like this place was designed for us." They moved deeper into the station, through corridors that stretched for miles. The walls were covered with images that moved and changed as they watched. Jake saw battles in space, warriors in shining armor fighting creatures made of shadow and darkness. The warriors carried weapons that blazed with the light of stars. "These are historical records," Nathan said, running his hands over the moving pictures. "This whole station is like a giant library. Look at this." The image changed to show a great hall filled with hundreds of the armored warriors. They knelt before an altar made of what looked like captured starlight. Words appeared in the air above them, written in a language Jake had never seen, but somehow understood. "We are the Stellar Knights," the words said. "We stand between the light and the darkness. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. We give our lives so that others may live in peace." "Knights," Amy whispered. They called themselves Knights. Nathan was already working to translate more of the records. These knights were guardians of the entire galaxy. They had codes of honor, rules they lived by. They protected every species, every world, from something called the Void Spawn. The images showed the enemy the knights had fought. The Void Spawn were creatures of living darkness that consumed light and life wherever they went. They came from the spaces between galaxies, hungry and endless. The knights fought them for thousands of years, keeping them back from the worlds full of life. What happened to them? Jake asked. Nathan found the answer in the final records. 3,000 years ago, the Void Spawn had launched their greatest attack. They opened massive holes in space itself, pouring through in numbers that darkened entire star systems. The knights had made a desperate choice. They had used all their power, all their lives, to seal the holes and push the Void Spawn back into the emptiness. The last knight had died saving the galaxy. The Order was lost forever. "Not forever," Amy said quietly. She was standing in front of another section of wall. "Look at this." The wall showed a prophecy, written in the same language they could somehow read. It spoke of a time when the seals would weaken and the Void Spawn would return. But it also spoke of new guardians who would rise to take the place of the fallen. Knights. The prophecy described these new guardians in detail. They would come from a young species, one that had only recently reached the stars. They would have hearts full of courage and a desire to protect others, even strangers. Most importantly, they would be able to bond with the stellar energy that powered the Knights' weapons and armor. "The description," Nathan said, his voice shaking. "It describes humans perfectly." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. That is impossible. This station is thousands of years old. Humans had not even invented the wheel when this was written. But the evidence was all around them. As they explored deeper into the station, they found chambers filled with Knight equipment, armor that seemed to be waiting for someone to wear it, weapons that hummed with contained starlight, training rooms with holographic instructors, ready to teach the ancient fighting techniques. In the center of the station, they found the most important discovery of all. The forge was a massive chamber where new knights had once been made. Ancient. Machines stood ready to bond worthy individuals with stellar energy, giving them the power to fight the darkness. Danny Carter approached one of the armor sets. It was beautiful, made of materials that seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways. As he got closer, the armor began to glow brighter. "Sergeant, step back," Jake ordered. But Danny was fascinated. "Captain, I think it is responding to me. Look." The armor was indeed reacting to Danny's presence. Lights ran along its surface in patterns that matched his heartbeat. When he reached out to touch it, the metal was warm under his fingers. "The stellar energy," Nathan said, reading from another wall display. "It says here that the Knights' power came from their bond with the energy of stars. But it only works with beings who have the right kind of spirit, beings who truly want to protect others." Jake made another decision that would change everything. "We take samples of everything. Document all of this. Earth Command needs to see these records immediately." As they prepared to leave the station, Amy made one more discovery. Hidden in the deepest part of the station was a communication array, still active after all these years. It was monitoring the galaxy, watching for signs that the ancient enemy was returning. The readings it showed made Jake's blood run cold. Across the galaxy, in systems far from Earth, the array had detected disturbances. Dark energy signatures that matched the void spawn. The seals the ancient knights had died to create were weakening. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. Nathan studied the data. "According to this, the first breaches will happen within 5 years. Small ones at first, but growing larger. The void spawn are testing the barriers." Jake looked around at the station one more time. The ancient knights were gone, but they had left everything behind for whoever would come next. The armor, the weapons, the knowledge, and most importantly, the responsibility. "Set course for Earth," he ordered. "Maximum speed." As the Aurora pulled away from the station, Jake wondered if humanity was ready for what was coming. They were still a young species, barely 200 years into space travel. Other alien civilizations were thousands of years more advanced, but the ancient prophecy had been clear. The new knights would not come from the oldest or most advanced species. They would come from a species with the heart to stand against the darkness, no matter the cost. Jake hoped the prophecy was right. Because if it was wrong, if humans couldn't become the new stellar knights, then the galaxy would face the return of the void spawn with no one to protect it. The journey back to Earth would take 3 months. 3 months to prepare humanity for the greatest responsibility in galactic history. 3 months to turn soldiers and explorers into the legendary guardians the galaxy desperately needed. As Jake settled into his captain's chair for the long journey home, he could not shake the feeling that their discovery of the ancient station had not been an accident. Somehow, someway, the knights had guided them there. The fallen guardians had reached across 3,000 years to pass their ray. Sacred duty to the species they believed could carry it forward. The age of human knights was about to begin. 3 months after Captain Jake Morrison returned to Earth with his impossible discovery, The most secret military base on the planet was buzzing with activity. Deep beneath the mountains of Colorado, Project Excalibur had taken over an entire underground complex. Scientists, soldiers, and engineers worked around the clock to understand the technology. Jake's team had brought back from the ancient station. General Lisa Hayes stood in the main laboratory, watching her best people struggle with equipment that seemed to defy everything they knew about physics. The knight armor floated in containment fields, glowing with its own inner light. The weapons hummed with barely contained energy that their instruments could barely measure. "General, we have been studying this for 12 weeks, Dr. Susan Grant sighed, frustration clear in her voice. "The technology is beyond anything we have ever seen. The armor seems to be alive somehow. It responds to people, but we cannot figure out how to activate it properly." Lisa nodded. She had expected this. The ancient records Jake had brought back made it clear that becoming a knight was not just about putting on armor. It required some kind of bond between the person and the stellar energy that powered everything. "What about volunteers?" Lisa asked. "Have we found anyone willing to try the bonding process?" Susan pointed to a group of soldiers waiting in the next room. "We have dozens of volunteers, but the requirements are very specific. According to the ancient texts, only certain types of people can bond with stellar energy. They have to truly want to protect others, not for glory or power, but because it is the right thing to do." The first volunteer was Commander Ryan Phillips, a decorated pilot who had spent 15 years in Earth's defense forces. Ryan had read every report about the ancient knights and understood what they were asking him to do. If the bonding process worked, he would gain incredible power. If it failed, he might die. "Are you sure about this, Commander?" Lisa asked as Ryan prepared to enter the bonding chamber they had built based on the ancient designs. Ryan nodded. "General, if these void-spawn things are really coming back, someone has to be ready to fight them. The ancient knights died to protect the galaxy. If I can help bring that protection back, then it is worth the risk." Dr. Grant activated the bonding chamber. Ancient machinery that they only barely understood began to hum with power. Stellar energy, collected from the nearest star by equipment they could not even begin to duplicate, flowed into the chamber where Ryan waited. The first sign that something was happening came when Ryan's eyes began to glow with the same blue light as the night equipment. He gasped as energy flowed through his body, changing him on a level deeper than just physical. The armor that had been waiting in the chamber began to move, flowing over his body like liquid metal until it fit him perfectly. "Vital signs are stable," Dr. Grant reported, but her voice was filled with wonder. "Actually, they are better than stable. His strength ratings are off the charts. Reflexes are 3 times faster than human normal, and the energy output from the armor is incredible." When Ryan stepped out of the chamber, he was no longer just a human pilot. He moved with perfect balance and grace. His eyes still held that blue glow, and the armor seemed to respond to his thoughts. When he raised his hand, stellar energy gathered around his fingers like captured lightning. "How do you feel?" Lisa asked. Ryan smiled. "Different, stronger. But more than that, I can sense things I never could before. I can feel the space around Earth, the energy patterns of the solar system. In general, I can sense something else. Something dark at the edges of our galaxy, testing the barriers the ancient knights built." Word of Ryan's successful bonding spread quickly through the project. Within days, they had their second volunteer. Marine Colonel Danny Carter had served in 3 different conflicts and had always put the safety of others before his own. When he entered the bonding chamber, the process was even smoother than it had been with Ryan. The third volunteer was Navy pilot Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez. She had spent her career flying rescue missions, saving people from disasters both natural and man-made. The stellar energy recognized her immediately, bonding with her so perfectly that she could fly without her armor just by thinking about it. Each new knight was different, but they all shared certain abilities. Enhanced strength and speed that let them move like dancers in the heavy armor. Weapons that fired concentrated stellar energy, capable of cutting through any known material. Most importantly, they gained what the ancient texts called night. Sense, an awareness of threats and the ability to find those who needed protection. But the most remarkable change was in their dreams. Every night, all the human knights shared the same visions. They saw glimpses of the galaxy, distant star systems and worlds they had never visited. They sensed disturbances in space itself, places where the ancient barriers were growing weak. The knights are connected somehow, Dr. Nathan Brooks explained to the growing team of researchers. He had been studying the ancient records non-stop since returning from the station. The stellar energy creates a network that spans the entire galaxy. The original knights could sense threats anywhere and respond immediately. The dreams were becoming more urgent. Ryan often woke up knowing exactly where the next void spawn incursion would happen, sometimes weeks before their instruments detected anything. The network was preparing them for what was coming. General Hayes expanded the program rapidly. Within 6 months, they had 50 human knights, each bonded with stellar energy and equipped with armor and weapons that made them individually more powerful than entire battle fleets. But power was not what made them special. The knights lived by the same codes as their ancient predecessors. They protected those who could not protect themselves. They put the needs of others before their own safety. They never used their power for personal gain or glory. The stellar energy itself seemed to reinforce these values, making it impossible for anyone with selfish motives to complete the bonding process. Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez discovered this when they tried to bond a volunteer who had lied about his motivations. Colonel Brad Wilson thought becoming a knight would make him rich and famous. The moment the stellar energy touched him, it rejected him completely. He was thrown from the bonding chamber, unconscious but unharmed, and could never enter it again. The energy knows, Emma explained to Dr. Grant later. It can sense what is really in a person's heart. You cannot fake the desire to protect others. The first real test of the human knights came sooner than anyone expected. The deep space monitoring. Stations detected an energy signature moving toward the outer colonies at impossible speed. It matched the descriptions of void spawn in the ancient records. Ryan Phillips led a team of 12 knights to intercept it. They flew ships that were part technology and part stellar energy, capable of speeds that made normal spacecraft look like they were standing still. As they approached the disturbance, their night sense told them exactly what they were facing. A single void spawn scout had broken through a weak point in the ancient barriers. It was small compared to what would come later, but still large. Enough to consume an entire planet if it reached one. The creature was pure darkness given form, feeding on the light of stars and growing stronger with each one it devoured. Remember your training, Ryan told his team as they prepared to engage. These things feed on fear and anger. Stay calm. Focus on protection, not destruction. The battle lasted only minutes. The human knights fought with weapons of stellar fire, their armor blazing with protective energy. The void spawn was powerful, but it had never faced opponents who could match its hunger for destruction with an equally strong desire to protect. When it was over, the creature was gone, banished back to the emptiness between galaxies. The knights had won their first victory, but they all knew it was just the beginning. More will come, Ryan reported to General Hayes when they returned to Earth. The barriers are failing faster than we expected. We need more knights, and we need them soon. Lisa nodded. The human race had been chosen to inherit the greatest responsibility in galactic history. Ready or not, The age of human knights had truly begun. The galaxy's ancient protectors had awakened in new forms, and they would not let the darkness win again. 2 years had passed since the first human knights bonded with stellar energy. The ancient station that Captain Jake Morrison had discovered now buzzed with new life. Humans had renamed it Haven's Light and turned it into their headquarters. 300 knights now called it home, and more arrived every month from Earth's training centers. Knight Commander Ryan Phillips stood in the command center, watching the galaxy map that covered an entire wall. Red dots marked places where the ancient barriers were weakening. Yellow dots showed confirmed void spawn sightings. There were too many of both, and they were spreading faster than anyone had hoped. "Commander, we have an emergency transmission from the Centauri colonies," Lieutenant Ben Jackson reported from his station. Jackson was one of the newer knights, bonded only 6 months ago, but his knight sense was already strong. Ryan felt the disturbance before he heard the message. His connection to the stellar energy network told him that something terrible was happening in the nearest star system to Earth. The distress call confirmed his worst fears. "This is I, Colony Administrator Helen Clark on New Geneva," the woman's voice was full of panic. "We are under attack by something impossible. Our entire defense fleet has been destroyed. The attackers are draining the light from our sun. Please, if anyone can hear this, we need help immediately." Ryan gathered his strike team without hesitation. 12 of the most experienced knights prepared for immediate departure. They wore armor that had adapted to each of them personally, glowing with the blue light of contained stellar energy. Their weapons were extensions of their will, capable of channeling the power of stars into focused beams of destruction. "Remember what we learned from the ancient records," Ryan told his team as they boarded their ships. "Void spawn are not just enemies to fight. They are entropy itself, the opposite of everything we protect. Stay focused on saving lives, not on destroying our enemies." The flight to Centauri took only hours in ships powered by stellar energy. As they approached the system, the knights could see the devastation immediately. 3 of the system's 4 planets were already dead, their surfaces gray and lifeless. The star itself was dimmer than it should be, its light being drained by massive creatures that wrapped around it like parasites. "Dear God," whispered Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, one of the team's youngest knights. "How many people lived here?" 12 million across all the colonies," answered Knight Tony Garcia, checking his scanner. "But I am only detecting life signs on New Geneva. Maybe 200,000 survivors, and their life support is failing." Ryan made quick decisions. "Sarah, Tony, Kevin, get to New Geneva and start evacuations. The rest of us will engage the void spawn directly. We need to drive them away from the star before they drain it completely." The battle that followed was unlike anything in human history. The void spawn were massive, each one the size of a battleship, but made of living shadow. They moved through space like they were swimming through water, feeding on the star's energy, and growing larger with every moment. Ryan led the attack personally, his armor blazing with stellar fire as he flew directly at the largest creature. His weapon fired beams of concentrated starlight that cut through the shadow stuff of the void spawn, causing them to shriek with voices that were felt rather than heard. "Form up, diamond pattern," Ryan commanded. "Kevin's team, focus on them. Small ones. Don't let them get behind us." Knight Captain Lisa Park flew alongside him, her weapons spinning around her like a deadly dance. She had been a pilot before becoming a knight, and her skills in zero-gravity combat were unmatched. "These things are different from the scouts we fought before," she called out. "They are working together, like they have a plan." She was right. The void spawn were not just feeding randomly. They were systematically draining the star in a pattern that would cause it to collapse and explode, destroying everything in the system including the fleeing survivors. We need to cut them off from the star, Ryan realized. If we can break their connection to the energy source, they will weaken. The Knights changed their strategy. Instead of attacking the creatures directly, they focused on the streams of stolen starlight that flowed between the void spawn and their victim. Using their own stellar energy, they created barriers that blocked the feeding process. The effect was immediate. Cut off from their food source, the void spawn began to shrink and weaken, but they also became more desperate and dangerous. The largest one, nearly the size of a small moon, turned its attention from the star to the Knights themselves. "It is coming for us," Tony Garcia reported from the evacuation zone. "Whatever you did, it made that thing very angry." Ryan felt the creature's hunger like a physical weight pressing down on him. The void spawn was not just trying to consume energy now. It wanted to devour the Knights themselves, to feed on the stellar power that bonded with their bodies and souls. "All Knights, maximum power," Ryan ordered. "We end this now?" 12 human Knights gathered their power and struck as one. Stellar energy blazed between them, creating a web of pure light that surrounded the largest void spawn. The creature fought, desperately, lashing out with tendrils of darkness that could have destroyed entire fleets. But the Knights held firm, drawing on their training and their absolute determination to protect innocent lives. The final moment came when Ryan flew directly into the creature's center, his armor protecting him from the crushing darkness. Inside the void spawn, he found its core, a twisted knot of stolen energy that pulsed with malevolent life. Without hesitation, he released all of his stellar power at once. The explosion lit up the entire star system. When the light faded, the void spawn were gone, banished back to the emptiness between galaxies. The star of Centauri began to burn normally again, no longer drained by the shadow creatures. But the victory came at a cost. Ryan's armor was cracked and dim, his connection to the stellar energy severely weakened. It would take weeks for him to recover, and he would never again be as powerful as he had been before the sacrifice. News of the battle spread across human space and beyond. For the first time, other alien species began to pay attention to what humanity was doing. The galaxy's older civilizations had heard rumors about the new Knights, but many had dismissed them as primitive warmongering. The ethereal collective sent an ambassador to Haven's Light within days of the Centauri battle. High Ethereal Zon Miran was a being of pure energy, ancient beyond human understanding. She had lived for thousands of years and remembered the original Stellar Knights. "Your species is young," she told Ryan as he recovered in the station's medical bay. "The Stellar Knights were an order that took millennia to develop. How can you claim their mantle after only 2 years?" Ryan was too tired to be diplomatic. "We did not claim anything. The stellar energy chose us. The ancient station called us, and when people needed protection, we answered." Zon Miran studied the human knight for a long moment. "The original Knights said the same thing. Perhaps there is more to your species than we assumed." Other alien governments were less accepting. A Silicon hegemony viewed the human Knights as a potential threat to galactic stability. The Aquatic Federation worried that humans would use their new power to expand their territory. Trade negotiations that had been proceeding smoothly for decades suddenly became complicated. But Ryan and his fellow Knights ignored the politics. They had work to do. Reports of void spawn sightings were increasing across the galaxy. The ancient barriers were failing faster than expected, and more creatures were breaking through every week. Within months of the Centauri battle, the human Knights had established outposts on a dozen worlds. They worked with local security forces, teaching them how to recognize void spawn energy signatures and evacuate civilians when attacks came. The Knights never asked for payment or territory. They simply did their job and moved on to the next crisis dot. The galaxy was beginning to understand that something had changed. For the first time in 3,000 years, the darkness had enemies who would not back down. The meeting chamber in the Galactic Council building had never seen tension like this. Representatives from 47 different species sat around the massive circular table, but all eyes were focused on the human delegation. Knight Commander Ryan Phillips sat calmly in his chair, his armor dim but still glowing faintly with stellar energy. High ethereal Zon Kaller floated above his seat, his energy form crackling with barely contained anger. "These humans have been operating in our space for 8 months without permission," he declared to the assembly. "They claim to be protecting us, but who gave them this authority?" The Ethereal Collective was the oldest known civilization in the galaxy. They had evolved beyond physical form millions of years ago and considered themselves the natural leaders of galactic affairs. The idea that a species that had only reached the stars 200 years ago could suddenly become galactic protectors was insulting to them. "We have ancient treaties," added Chancellor Vexkrill of the Silicon Hegemony. "Laws that govern military action between species. These knights operate outside all established protocols." Ryan had heard these complaints many times in the past months. The success of the human knights had brought attention from governments across the galaxy, and not all of it was welcome. Many species saw humanity's rapid rise to power as a threat to the established order. "We follow only one law," Ryan said quietly. "When innocent people are in danger, we help them. We do not ask for permission to save lives." "And that is exactly the problem," Zon Kaller snapped. "You act without consultation, without considering the consequences. What happens when your help is not wanted?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Ryan knew that some species had indeed refused knight assistance, preferring to handle void spawn attacks with their own forces. The results had been catastrophic, but the knights had respected those decisions and stayed away. Before Ryan could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the council building. Emergency lights flashed red as automated systems announced a priority. Alert! The great view screen at the center of the chamber activated, showing a star map with a massive red warning signal. "Dimensional breach detected in the ethereal home system," the computer announced. "Class 5 void spawn incursion in progress. All ships in the area are advised to evacuate immediately." The color drained from Zon Kaller's energy form. A Class 5 incursion meant hundreds of void spawn creatures, possibly thousands. It was the largest attack anyone had seen since the ancient records described the final battle of the original knights. "Impossible," Zon Kaller whispered. "Our home system has the strongest defenses in the galaxy. Nothing should be able to breach our barriers." Ryan was already standing, his armor brightening as he contacted Haven's light through the stellar energy. "Network. All available knights. Prepare for immediate deployment. We have a major incursion in the ethereal system." "Commander Phillips," Zon Kaller said, his voice now uncertain instead of angry. "Our defense fleets will handle this. The Ethereal Collective does not need human assistance." Ryan looked at him with eyes that glowed with stellar fire. "Your defense. Fleets have never fought void spawn before. My knights have. Every minute we waste arguing, more of your people die." The debate became pointless when new reports began streaming in. The Ethereal Defense Fleet, the most advanced military force in known space, had engaged the void spawn and been destroyed in less than 10 minutes. Evacuation ships were fleeing the system, but the creatures were faster than any normal spacecraft. "Estimated casualties are in the hundreds of millions," the Council's military advisor reported. "The void spawn are not just attacking ships. They are draining entire planets of life energy." Zon Kaller's proud demeanor crumbled. "We cannot stop them. Our weapons pass through them without effect. Our shields mean nothing against creatures made of living entropy. Ryan was already moving toward the door. My knights are en route. We will hold them off while your people evacuate. Wait, Zonkalar called after him. If you do this, if you save our homeworld, the Ethereal Collective will owe humanity a debt we can never repay. Rien paused at the doorway. We do not do this for debts or gratitude. We do it because it is right. The flight to the ethereal system took the human knights 4 hours, even at maximum speed. They arrived to find a scene of devastation that surpassed their worst nightmares. The system's 7 planets were under attack by a swarm of void spawn that stretched across space like a living cloud of darkness. Knight Commander Emma Rodriguez led one wing of the assault force. She had been promoted after Ryan's injuries at Centauri, and her tactical skills had proven excellent in the smaller battles that followed. But nothing had prepared her for this scale of combat. I count over 300 major contacts, she reported to Ryan, plus thousands of smaller creatures. They are organized. Commander, this is not a random feeding. They have a battle plan. Ryan studied the tactical display from his command ship. The knights had brought every available warrior, nearly 400 in total, but they were still outnumbered 10 to 1. Worse, the void spawn had learned from their previous defeats. They were no longer attacking randomly, but moving in coordinated formations. All knights, listen carefully, Ryan broadcast to his forces. We cannot win this battle through direct combat. Our mission is evacuation support. Protect the civilian ships and give them time to escape. The battle that followed lasted for 3 days and became known as the Siege of Eternity, named after the Ethereal's homeworld. Human knights fought desperately against impossible odds, using every tactic they had learned from the ancient records and their own hard-won experience. Lieutenant Ben Jackson died on the first day, his ship overwhelmed while protecting a transport full of ethereal children. Knight Captain Lisa Park was seriously wounded on the second day, but refused medical evacuation, continuing to fight with her armor cracked and her left arm useless. The turning point came when Ryan made the same choice that the ancient knights had made 3,000 years before. The largest void spawn, a creature so massive it dwarfed entire moons, was moving toward the dimensional rift that had brought the swarm into normal space. If it reached the rift and began to expand it, the entire galaxy would be defenseless against invasion. All knights, fall back to minimum safe distance, Ryan ordered. I am going to seal the rift. Emma understood immediately what he meant to do. Ryan, no. The ancient records say that sealing a rift that size requires more power than any single knight can survive. Then it requires more power than I have left to give, Ryan replied. Take care of the others, Emma. The galaxy needs its knights. Ryan flew his ship directly into the heart of the dimensional rift, just as the ancient knights had done millennia before. The stellar energy that bonded with his body and soul became a weapon of incredible power. Light blazed from his armor. As he poured everything he had into the sealing ritual described in the oldest records, the explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. When it faded, the dimensional rift was gone, sealed permanently. The void spawn cut off from there. Source of reinforcements began to weaken and retreat. The remaining knights drove them back into the emptiness between galaxies. But Ryan Phillips, the first human knight, and the one who had led them all, was gone forever. News of Ryan's sacrifice spread across the galaxy faster than any government could control it. Species that had never spoken to each other began working together for the first time in recorded history. The human knights had proven that some principles were worth dying for, and their example inspired others to be better than they had been. The Ethereal Collective formally thanked humanity and offered them full membership in the Galactic Council. Other species followed suit, but more importantly, volunteers from dozens of species began arriving at Haven's Light, asking to train alongside the human knights. The age of cooperation had begun, forged in the fire of one human's ultimate sacrifice. 1 year after Ryan Phillips gave his life to save the ethereal homeworld, Knight Commander Emma Rodriguez stood before the largest gathering in galactic history. The great assembly hall on Haven's Light had been expanded 3 times to hold all the delegates, but it was still not enough. Representatives from over 400 species filled every available space, while millions more watched through quantum. Communication links.Emma looked out at the crowd and felt the weight of responsibility that Ryan had carried. She wore the same type of armor he had worn, glowing with the same blue stellar energy, but she knew she could never replace him. No one could. Instead, she had learned to carry forward his vision of what the Knights could become. Friends from across the galaxy, Emma began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall's advanced sound system. We gather today not to mourn what we have lost, but to celebrate what we have gained. 1 year ago, many of you saw humans as primitive newcomers to galactic civilization. Today, we stand together as partners in the greatest alliance our galaxy has ever known. The new stellar order had grown beyond anything the ancient knights had achieved. What started as a few hundred human warriors had become a coalition of thousands. The stellar energy that bonded with humans so perfectly had also proven compatible with other species, though in different ways. Ethereal knights could phase between dimensions, making them perfect scouts and rescue specialists. Silicon knights were nearly indestructible, able to survive in environments that would kill any other life form. Aquatic knights could operate in any liquid environment and had developed underwater combat techniques that amazed even the humans. Doctor Nathan Brooks, now the Order's chief historian and strategist, had made the most important discovery of all. The ancient stellar knights had not been a single species either. Hidden deep in the oldest records were references to the First Alliance, a coalition of different species that had worked together to create the original order. The ancient knights were not all the same, Nathan explained to Emma during one of their planning sessions. They came from dozens of different worlds, each bringing their own strengths to the alliance. Humans did not replace the knights. We helped restore them to what they were always meant to be. The proof was in the results. Void spawn attacks that once required hundreds of human knights to repel could now be handled by mixed teams of 20 or 30. Each species brought unique abilities that complemented the others perfectly. Knight Captain Alex Chon led one such mixed team to a mining colony in the Outer Rim territories. When they arrived, they found a situation that would have been impossible for any single species force to handle. The void spawn had infected the colony's computer systems, turning the automated defenses against the miners who built them. Standard approach will not work here, Alex reported to Emma. The base's shields are designed to keep everything out, including us, but the miners inside are running out of air. The solution came from their ethereal team member, Knight Zon Thera. She could phase through the shields without triggering the defense systems. Once inside, she disabled the infected computers while the Silicon Knight, VEX7742, used his incredible strength to break open the sealed sections where miners were trapped. Meanwhile, Alex and the human knights dealt with the void spawn creatures that had been feeding on the colony's power systems. The battle was over in less than an hour, with 0 civilian casualties. 6 months earlier, the same attack would have taken days to resolve and cost hundreds of lives. Success stories like this were happening across the galaxy every week. But Emma knew that their greatest achievement was not military victory. It was the change in how different species treated each other. Before the Knights returned, our species rarely cooperated. High Ethereal Zon Miran explained during a council meeting. We competed for resources, territory, and influence. The Knights taught us that we are stronger when we work together. The change was most visible in the younger generation. Ethereal children learned about human courage in their schools. Silicon. Youth studied aquatic philosophy. Human teenagers dreamed of exploring the galaxy alongside alien friends instead of conquering it. Trade between species increased dramatically as trust replaced suspicion. Scientific research projects that had been impossible due to political barriers suddenly became routine. The galaxy was experiencing a golden age of cooperation and discovery, but Emma never forgot that their primary mission was protection, not politics. The void spawn were still a threat, and the ancient barriers continued to weaken despite all their efforts to reinforce them. The largest test came when deep space monitors detected something that chilled even the most experienced knights. A massive dimensional rift was forming at the galaxy's edge, far larger than anything they had seen before. Preliminary scans suggested that thousands of void spawn were gathering on the other side, preparing for an invasion that would dwarf all previous attacks. This is what the original Knights faced 3,000 years ago, Dr. Nathan Brooks told the Emergency Council meeting, the final battle that cost them everything. Emma studied the tactical reports with growing concern. Even with all their allies and improved cooperation, the Knights numbered less than 3,000. The coming invasion would bring tens of thousands of void spawn into normal space. "We need to think differently," Emma said finally. "The original Knights tried to fight this battle alone. We have something they did not have. We have the entire galaxy working with us." The plan that emerged was ambitious beyond anything ever attempted. Instead of just sending Knights to fight the void spawn, they would create a galactic defense network. Every species would contribute according to their abilities. The Ethereals would provide their advanced shield technology. The Silicon hegemony would build massive defense platforms. The Aquatic Federation would create mobile support bases. Most importantly, they would train ordinary citizens from every species in basic defense techniques. If the void spawn broke through the night lines, they would face not helpless victims, but a galaxy full of people ready to fight for their homes. Work took 6 months and required cooperation on a scale never before achieved. Species that had been enemies for centuries worked side by side. Ancient grudges were set aside in favor of mutual survival. When the dimensional rift finally opened, the void spawn found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. Instead of a small group of elite warriors, they met the combined might of an entire galaxy, united in defense of their homes. The battle lasted for a week and involved over 1 million ships from hundreds of different species. Knights led the charge, their stellar weapons blazing against the darkness. But they were supported by everything from ethereal energy cannons to silicon ramming ships to aquatic torpedo swarms. Emma herself led the final assault on the dimensional rift, but this time she was not alone. 1,000 knights from dozens of species flew beside her, their combined power focused on a single goal. Together, they sealed the rift permanently, cutting off the void spawn from their home dimension forever. The victory celebration lasted for months, but Emma knew the real victory was not the battle itself. It was what the galaxy had become in, preparing for it. Species that had lived in isolation for millennia were now permanent allies. The Knights had not just saved the galaxy from the void spawn, they had saved it from its own divisions. Years later, Emma often stood in the observation deck of Haven's Light, watching mixed crews of Knights patrol the space around the station. Human and ethereal pilots flew together in perfect formation. Silicon engineers worked alongside aquatic technicians to maintain the station's systems. The galaxy had changed forever. The age of isolation and competition was over. An age of cooperation and mutual protection had begun. And at the heart of it all were the Knights, no longer just human warriors, but the living symbol of what different species could achieve when they worked together. The ancient Knights had been lost to the stars, 3,000 years ago. But they had returned stronger than ever, carrying within them the best qualities of every species in the galaxy. The darkness would always exist at the edges of reality, but it would never again find the galaxy divided and helpless. The knights were home, and they would never be lost again.